Good afternoon. You know, for such an event, it always takes a lot of work behind the scene. So the first thing I do is I would like to ask you to give a round of applause for all the volunteers who did the work. And I met Urvashi in April 16. Time passes. We were in the same forum, and I was so moved and impressed by her. I almost decided right away that I want to see her in Taiwan because we do need to listen to her. We do need to know more, to learn more about India. I'm a volunteer of the foundation, which started 13 years ago. And my assigned job is to do the housekeeping report. So first of all, in your hand, you have this orange color brochure. Because this is 2018, we are doing the 50th anniversary retrospective of 1968. So the upcoming event, don't forget April 15 and April 28th, but both of these are in Mandarin. So for April 15th is a talk on the May movement of 1968, France, Paris. That's an exciting time where the student movement combined with labor movement and everything else together, which had a huge impact on the development later in France. And April 28th, we have a writer flying into Taiwan from Osaka to talk about 1968 Japan. We actually know very little about that part of history. And then for people who are under 30, can you raise your hand if you are under 30? Wow, well, I think it's 90%. So here's your chance. You probably have heard of the Economic Forum of Davos in Switzerland. But there is another one which is very important, which started in 1945. That's the European Forum Altbach in Austria, which is a beautiful village in the depths of the Alps. And the foundation is the Asian partner for European Forum Altbach. And we sponsor 5 people who are under the age of 30 to go to Austria in August. And you'll be there for 3 weeks, talking with world leaders from different areas, and you will be sharing your ideas with another 699 students from different regions of the world, meaning they take altogether 700 students. So do grab this opportunity. All the information is online. So for housekeeping, and we have very many distinguished guests here as well. But allow me to only mention 2 friends here. One is the ambassador of Belize to the Republic of China. That's Miss Haylock. Where are you sitting? Great. Good to have you. And another is the representative of Papua New Guinea Trade Office in Taiwan, Mr. Kunji. Okay. Good to have you. Okay, I'd really like to tell you a lot about Urvashi today, but it's not my job today. We have a wonderful moderator today. That's the Professor Zhong Shifang from Zhengzhi University. And I'm going to read a little bit from what we have prepared about the moderator today. In 1993, Shifang founded Trees Music and Art. That is an independent folk and grassroots music record label, which has nurtured some of the most vital Taiwanese music artists for 3 decades. And in 2001, Shifang started the Migration Music Festival, which is a major platform in Taiwan for folk and world music that embraces artistic expression with activism. So that is not just a music festival. It is a music festival as a platform for social progress. And as a filmmaker, that is something really extra. As a filmmaker, Professor Chong gained acclaim for her first documentary, which is called From Border to Border, which traces the history of Chinese immigrants in India. Okay, so we have one extraordinary woman who hosts the talk of a very extraordinary woman from India today. What a pleasure. Let's welcome Shifang.
Thank you, Professor Low, for the nice introduction. It is my privilege to introduce our speaker today. I'm going to read a passage from her book. I realized then that in this silence lay the many hidden histories of partition, the histories that have always hovered at the edges of those that have been told, the histories that describe the dark side of freedom. As I began to search, slowly, inexorably, this history revealed itself. That was from the book, The Other Side of Silence, Voices from the Partition of India, written by our speaker today, Urvashi Butalia. The book is commented by the prominent Indian writer Amitav Ghosh, one of the most important books ever to be written about the partition of the Indian subcontinent. Urvashi Butalia was born into a progressive and atheist family of Punjabi heritage. Her mother, Sabhadra Butalia, a refugee of the 1947 partition, was a feminist who ran a counseling center for women. Urvashi Butalia started her career working with the Oxford University Press in Delhi. Over decades, she has devoted herself to the entrepreneurship of founding and managing independent publishing houses. She co-founded India's first feminist publishing house, Kali for Women, in 1984, and is currently directing the Zuban Books, an imprint of Kali for Women and among the most important of feminist voices in India. Urvashi Butalia has a long involvement in the women's movement in India. She writes and publishes essays and articles on a wide range of issues on women and gender with the feminist and the left-wing perspectives. Her talk today will draw on the hidden history of partition and the political activism within women's movement in India, and the representations of Indian women in mass media. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give us our warmest welcome to our speaker today, Urvashi Butalia.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Good evening. I'm delighted to be here. It's very strange to hear yourself described by someone else because you keep thinking I'm just a regular girl, and you wonder at all of that. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to apologize to you if many of you were expecting to see the young woman with typewriters that you saw on the poster. It's a great poster, but that is me 30 years ago. The same feminist, but grown now into the feminist you saw on the screen. I'm delighted and honored to be invited to speak here, and I'd like to thank the Lung Yung Tai Foundation, Cultural Foundation, for thinking of me. As Dr. Lung mentioned to you, we met a couple of years ago in Boston. And likewise, I was really impressed with her and listening to her story and thought how amazing it was to make those kinds of friendships across borders. and really pleased to be invited here to speak. And before I start, I want also to thank the under 30s who have come and sat on the floor here. I think it's great that you've done that. Many, many thanks. You know, when we met in Boston, in conversations, I began to feel that despite our very, very different histories, there were a number of commonalities between Taiwan and India. And this might sound strange because we are two completely different countries, not only in size and scale, but in all sorts of other things. But I did think that there were some commonalities and a great deal that we could learn from each other. And as I hope to show in this talk, the commonalities will become clear in what I'm talking about. I want to start by telling you some stories. I find that usually stories help to connect people in ways that academic arguments don't. So here is my first story. A few months ago, I was at an event organized by a child rights organization in Delhi, and sitting next to me in the audience was a thin, frail woman dressed very differently from me, and it was clear to me from her clothes that she belonged to a village in North India. Her name is Bhavari Devi. I know her. I have known her for many years. She belongs to the very bottom of the economic and caste ladder in India. She's poor. Her husband is a potter, and their livelihood consists of making terracotta pots, which people use in villages and in towns to store water. So they work with the raw material of mud and clay, which they pick up from around them, and then they fashion that using a potter's wheel into handmade pots, and we buy them, use them to store water, and so on. But Bhavari has another history. In the early 90s, she was working with a large development organization, a development project set up by the Indian government, in her home state of Rajasthan, which is in North India. One of her tasks was to make people aware of the law that made child marriages illegal in India. This meant trying to persuade parents to let their children study instead of arranging their marriages. In one such attempt, she came across a group of upper caste men who were preparing to marry their young children. When she tried to stop them, the men, furious that a woman of a lower class than them could dare to tell them what to do, they decided to teach her a lesson. And while she was out in the fields working, 4 of them raped her. Bhavari's experience led to huge protests by women's groups in Rajasthan and across the country. It also resulted in widespread discussions within the women's movement. The protests focused on the continuing sexual violence towards women and the urgent need to address it. The discussions focused on another aspect. Bhavari was performing her job when she was raped. Thus, theoretically, even though she was out in the fields, she was at work. Was she therefore not entitled to some sort of guarantee of a safe and secure workplace? Opposition to Bhavari, for there is always some opposition to the woman who has faced sexual violence. Opposition to her demanded to know what she was doing out of the village so late at night. What was she doing in the fields? And yet, these were the very areas where she carried out her work. So if families were out in the fields, it was her job to go and talk to them and persuade them not to marry their children. So women's groups began to ask the question, how should the workplace be defined for women? Could a field be seen as a workplace? Or was it only the 4 walls of an office that signified a workplace? And if indeed the field could be seen as a workspace, then surely the worker, in this case Bhavari, had a right to a secure and safe working environment. The discussions led to the filing of what was to become a historic petition in the Supreme Court of India. It was called the Vishakha Petition. It demanded that measures be put in place to ensure safety and security for women in the workplace. The Supreme Court of India issued an initial set of guidelines to offices and institutions, and eventually they issued a law on sexual harassment in the workplace, one that today mandates that all offices, all institutions, all factories that employ more than 20 people must institute measures to prevent and contain sexual harassment and to deal with such cases as do occur. These measures involve setting up committees to deal with them, holding workshops with their staff, sensitizing workers, sensitizing managers, and putting in place a set of rules that can apply when a case is filed. The morning before I met Bhavari, I had been at a large corporate gathering where gender discrimination at the workplace was a key item on the agenda. A large hall filled with hundreds of women and some men discussed and debated the importance of dealing with this issue, which is now being done across the board in many, many corporate institutions in India. Sexual harassment was a key item on the agenda, and CEO after CEO came up onto the stage to speak of the necessity of dealing with this long-silenced problem. Nobody really remembered that the problem had been given a voice, a name, and a materiality by a poor village woman from Rajasthan, the woman called Bhavari Devi.